Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fanfiction Tapes podcast. I am Dylan, and I'm your host for today. And with me, I have.
Wolf.
And I'm our producer, Ian.
And today, our topic of discussion is a classic trope that has been popularized in the current day. We're discussing Portal Fantasy and Isekais. So, of course, the thing that we have to establish is what is a Portal Fantasy? What makes an Isekai? So, Wolf, want to start us off? What for you is a Portal Fantasy?
Oh God, you want me to go first? Ugh. So for me, Portal Fantasy is I mean, Portal Fantasy and Isekai for me are both the same thing. I would say they are the same genre, but the select differences I feel between the two would be Portal Fantasy generally is the characters find a way into their other world, right? Their magical world, either through The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia, the Wardrobe, or Wizard of Oz, the Tornado, and things, or, something more relevant to people, the Owl House, the Door, that's Portal Fantasy, right? And one of the other key aspects I would say of Portal Fantasy is that at some point in the Portal Fantasy, the character is going to want to get back to their original world, the world they came from, right? They're going to want to go back. They're going to want to get out of the fantasy world and go back for whatever the reason might be. Either they just don't like it, or they've had a change of heart, or they've had their character growth and it's time to go back. Whatever the reason is, they're going to want to go back at some point. For Isekai, right? The thing there is generally the character doesn't get there through finding a portal or a way to the other world. They have to die to get there. And the second thing is, more often than not, they're not going to go back to their original world. They don't want to go back. They like the new world way better. And generally, more often than not, their life is a lot better in the new world as well. That's my take personally on like the differences between isekai and proto fantasy, at least from a general standpoint, right? Not getting into any literary things as of yet.
Yeah. When I think about some of the most popular isekai, what I believe is like their way of going about it is usually either someone dies or just something happens and then they're in a new world. Portal Fantasy, we are right, is usually they fall into it or there's something that the character does. I usually feel like there's no change in their state and they're not like a new person usually. It's usually, okay, I was here and now I'm here. And there's also like the portal element. Like, I don't feel like in Isekais we see a physical thing that moves people between realms, whatever. It's just, you were here and now you're here.
There's a few that have done the portal element, as far as isekai goes, but I would say that's more of a rarity. That's not the default, right? And I would also say like a lot of the reason for that, I think, right, is because of the differences in what both types of storytelling are trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
For Portal Fantasy, which generally, and especially Portal Fantasy with a more Western focus, right? The goal is to teach a lesson or some moral guide, some moral quandaries, blah, 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 in regards to escapism, more often than not. For Isekai, it's about the escapism, but it's, you're not trying to like, oh, escapism, bad, it's basically, nah, life shit. Forgive my language. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on this podcast. No one told me.
We're good. We're good.
All right, we're good. All right, cool. But yeah. And before something random bleep to make me seem like an awful, horrible person. Cool. No, but yeah, like for isekai, it's about the escapism, right? It's about, just getting away from a horrible life and coming into this new life, which is generally speaking way better. It's about the escapism, the power fantasy, just being able to enjoy that and have something better for yourself in death.
And also, usually, it is sort of a second chance. I f***ed
Mhm.
up. Sorry, but I've messed up my
There's
first
your one.
life. Yeah, I messed up my first life, and in my second life, I can do things better. Either be a better person, get to do things I didn't get to do the first time around, and that's the way I generally see isekais.
Mhm.
Usually, when we look at like uh Western portal fantasies, usually there's not like that. Oh, this it's more exploring the world than how this new world affects the character.
I
Like
I
if we,
disagree with that.
it depends on what we perceive. Like if we look at Narnia, for example, which is a lot of books, but if we just look at the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, it is this unique world with all this sort of unique mythology, politics, and we do see like the characters sort of change a little bit, but b- I don't think it's like the characters are like, oh, we're in this new world, and this world is like changing me, and I know it. It's more of like they're just on an adventure. It
I
feels like.
I personally still disagree with you on that. Especially looking at the Chronicles of Narnia, or the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe specifically, right? I would argue Portal Fantasy tends to be more character driven and focused, especially because the Portal Fantasy is usually there, like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, to teach the characters who go through the portal about why the world or life they originally came from isn't quite so bad, right? Or to help them grow into more of an adult, right? Quote unquote. And where isekai isn't really there to explore the character as much necessarily. Some of them do, don't get me wrong, but in a general sense, isekai tends to explore more of the world, but it doesn't explore the world from the characters' viewpoints. Whereas Portal Fantasy, I would argue, tends to explore the world from the characters' viewpoints, right? And helps the characters grow through that magical world so they can then come back to their original world and be, quote unquote, better. Isekai, you don't do that. You don't go back to the original world and be better. Generally, there are a few that do this, but they are the
Mm,
exception, not the rule, in my opinion.
mm. Before we move on to the next point, should we just mention like a few other types of isekai portal fantasy type things, like sort of uh the RPG isekai,
Yeah,
sort of
there's many of
digital.
these.
Yeah, we describe like a digital isekai where the person can still like, it is more in the portal fantasy style where it's like they can go between two, but it's in a virtual world. Think, Spy Kids. Spy Kids
Spy
3.
Kids is one.
Yeah.
For
Right.
Isekai, you can look at Bofuri, or I don't want to get hurt, so I'll max out my defense. I believe that's the title. It's a long title. Anyways, there's also Sword Art Online is a really popular one.
And there used to be a show on Cartoon Network, I think, that was very similar to that, like years ago.
Are you thinking of Dot Hack?
Might be.
I think that was, I mean, that's technically an anime, but yeah, that works. But
But
I think,
I went to know at
Or
the time, Wolf.
I mean, Dot Hack aired on Cartoon Network. If you're thinking Western animation, oh geez, no, I'm drawing a blank. Too far
it's
back
not,
in the mists of
yeah.
time.
And the other one I want to talk about is they also reverse isekai, where we bring someone from another world into ours.
Yes,
How? Yep.
Recreators, I believe, is an extremely
Yes.
popular one. If you've not watched it, go watch it. It's one of the few good ones.
That is a point we'll get onto later. But yeah, obviously with isekai there are many types of ways to go about it. Obviously, it's not limited to a person is teleported into a fantasy world or whatever. We have digital worlds, which could be fantasy, could be sci-fi, could be space. You, it's a trope, or like a sort of a genre that you can do a lot with. And we'll get onto it later, but this is something I want to talk about with that. Let's describe how our main characters in Isekai usually are. So, how do you feel about the trope of sort of the main character is better than the people around it, or is special, or has a unique ability? How, how does that resonate with you?
I've watched so much. I've watched a lot of isekai, all right? A lot. Many of them not great. Mostly because I love fantasy and enjoy fantasy in a general sense, and a lot of them tend to be fantasy. Not always, but more often than not. And again, they are fantasy because that helps with the trope of, hey, they come here and they be a lot smarter because of modern knowledge and stuff, and they just make it all better. For the most part, I have no issue with it, really. I'm kind of fine with it. Like, it's just one of those things you expect from the genre. You can, I'm sure you can have a lot of discussion on, is this offensive or not? Is this nationalism or not? I'm not equipped to have that conversation personally, but I can say at the very least, I've never found it like offensive or standoffish to a point that, okay, this is a problem, right? Generally speaking, if it's that bad, it tends to be, if the show is, if I do have problems with the show, it's bad for other reasons.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel, though, has there ever been a main character where you got, like, I don't want to say upset, but just went, come on? Like,
What do you mean? Like upset and how? Like that?
like it's sort of like the story was going a certain way and you were excited, and then they gave them like a weird power or something, and you were just like, huh? Or has there been one? I'm basically asking, have you ever had your hopes dashed by a main character?
Hmm. That one, I would say no, not really.
So we just felt good on that front.
Yeah, yes. Unfortunately for that topic, I can't really say too much on because for the most part, I would say, like, generally speaking, when it comes to the main characters for isekai, most of them, the way they start is more or less like I've not had any of them truly surprise me, right? I would say the only one that's really surprised me in where the character started and where they ended up at by the end of the season or what have you would be ReZero to a degree, and Jobless Reincarnation or Mushiko Tensei.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be the two that surprised me the most in what I expected and what it ended up being.
Yeah, why don't we talk about those as they are sort of the two sort of they are the two stories,
They've
that
set the bar, right? Like, I think
yeah,
as
they were
far
the
as
ones
isekai goes,
that
they've
did
set the
this.
bar.
Yeah, they did this like new generation of isekai. They were the ones at the start in that sort of early 2010s. They gave life into this genre. And surprisingly, they are a bit more unconventional than what you would think of your normal isekai, though. Generally, the stereotypes of an isekai, whether they're true or not, they're stereotypes for a reason, is super overpowered main character who gets everything he wants and all this. And
Or she.
yes. And generally, I don't want to say that Rudy and Subaru are both failures, but damn, they're failures a lot of the time.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that ReZero makes it very explicit that Subaru is an absolute loser.
But it's in a sense that you think of the trope of an isekai character, an isekai main character. And they don't really fit that trope, though.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think those two stories and what they did? What do you think was taken away from those stories, for better and for worse, of the isekais that have come in the 10, 11 years since?
Let me see one thing. I just want to see some dates here real quick.
I believe they were both around 2012.
So yeah, all right. So how do I think they've changed the genre since?
If even at all, or if you just think they popularized different things.
I mean, in a generalist sense, I don't think the genre has changed too much, but it's worth noting, right? Like ReZero, anime-wise, came out in 2016, right? I think.
Yes.
What came out first? The novel series, yeah, that was 2012. Looking at it, was there 2012 as well?
And then the Shoku anime was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was very recent for the anime. The novel apparently came out 2012 as well. It's interesting to note, right? Because a lot of your isekai that kind of tried to flip the genre on its head a little bit, like Mushoku Tensei and ReZero, kind of all started in that 2012 range. Even, because I was going to say, I feel like, anime that have come out since ReZero and Mushoku Tensei have, taken somewhat of the idea of like, oh, let's not start our character off as the super strong, right? Like, let's make them work for it. Let's give them some losses here. Like, say, Shield Hero, for example, the Rising of the Shield Hero. But actually, that one started at the same time too, so I can't say that. But a lot of them came from that. What I will say, Rising of the Shield Hero did change up the industry a little bit because it made us ask the question, is slavery okay? And a lot of isekai are still going through that and still asking that question right now.
Is it okay?
We don't know yet. We're still,
No.
we don't know yet. We've not come to that conclusion yet.
I know it's not an isekai, but I think Vinland Saga answered that, and it's not.
Isekai though, we're still asking that question because we recently had Black Summoner. That title, take from it what you will. But yeah, like it also asked the question, is slavery okay? Because Rising of the Shield Hero started it. But anyways, yeah. I don't think we've seen exactly yet. I don't think we've gotten far enough away from when they've released just yet to see exactly how ReZero or Mushoku Tensei are going to truly change up the genre as far as isekai is concerned. We're seeing a little bit of it, I think. But I think in a general sense, you're still seeing enough isekai come out where it's just, hey, the character's overpowered and we move on. We've not seen anywhere the character isn't, put on the back foot almost constantly, or the character has to work for it, right? Or they have the losses, right? Like you've seen, at the very least, a little bit more of the, hey, let's show the character being built up a bit more, right? And getting into, their power.
What I would say, though, do you think it popularized the genre more? That more isekai were made post these stories being created than before?
Let me see the date for one other thing. Yeah, I'm going to argue that I would say ReZero might have a little bit. When did its anime come out?
2016.
2016, yeah. I think by that time, there are already anime coming out that were more popular in the isekai genre, right? And I'm going to say that I don't think they've made it more popular. I think they made it more broad. They showed the appeal more and what you could more do with it. And I think because of that, in a general sense, you've seen more isekai come out. Yes. Or more people are dipping their toes in the water. But I don't think that they made it any more popular than it already was, right? I think they just, they added to it, but I don't think they I don't think they set this. They definitely set the standard, I suppose you could say, but they didn't set like, okay, here's the boom in popularity at this point in time. I think there's just too many already coming out before then and after the fact, really.
So yeah, we'll bring on to an interesting discussion later then. So now let's talk about these common tropes that we find often, or the ones that people believe are in there. So, Wolf, which one would you like to talk about first?
Uh, I mean, we can talk about everyone's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
The character probably with the highest body count in any fantasy, in any genre of any type ever.
Thanos is jealous of this guy.
I mean, to be fair, this guy only ever targets Japanese kids mostly, so I don't think he has too much to worry about.
Sometimes he hits middle-aged men.
Sometimes, but most of the time it's Japanese kids. And at the very least, he's not, only targeting males. He's targeting females too.
There was a series done by Stephen Moffat, formerly a Doctor Who writer, and it's like this woman is backing out of a house after she accidentally stabbed a woman. She just gets hit by a truck. There, he's in Britain. We know it, Wolf.
I mean, he's anywhere he needs to be at any given time because
when the plot demands it.
We are, of course, talking about the one, the only Truck-Kun.
Yes, a truck that kills indiscriminately all people, only in Japan though, and maybe Britain. We're not sure. Don't think we've seen him in the U.S. yet, at least.
So, what I was surprised to learn, or that I've seen constantly directed at me, is that Mushoku Tensei was the one that popularized this.
Is it? I don't feel
Apparently,
it is.
the popular, like, people have done it before, but the popularization of a truck or a vehicle of some kind, specifically a truck, is apparently a Mushoku Tensei popularization.
Did not know that.
Apparently, that is the claim.
I mean, fair enough. I can understand why, because it's, generally speaking, one of the more popular isekai, one of the more broad appeal isekais. So I can see why that's where it came popular from, but it's definitely been done before. And you can also see that there's definitely people who have said, hey, let's not do a truck. And the other popular form of this, how do we murder this person to get them into the other world, is just random crazy dude running down the street with a knife just held out.
Yeah.
For those who have seen Reincarnated as a Slime, dude's literally just walking down the street with his coworkers and just crazy guy comes running out, knife held in hand, pointed forward, and just accidentally stabs him. And like that's how that person, like, we don't have Truck-Kun there, we just have random knife guy, and that's also a meme at this point.
Knife pervert.
Not even pervert, just random knife guy.
It's a New Japan reference. You wouldn't get it.
I mean, but anyways, yeah, it's that's the other version of this at this point, because I've seen it quite a few times now where a random person gets stabbed by knife.
You don't know how nervous I was seeing Subaru walk out of that like little market and being right on the edge of the street. I was like, where's the truck? And I was pleasantly surprised when he just randomly teleported there.
Genuinely, that one shocked me as well, because I expected either a truck or, all right, he's gonna get stabbed. You're at a grocery store, you're buying stuff, you're going to get stabbed by someone. Someone's going to need rescuing, you're going to run over, and you're going to get stabbed. That's what's going to happen.
But no,
wait, that doesn't happen. Okay.
Bright light, image clears, fantasy world.
Like, that one genuinely shocked me. Like, I think that's the first isekai, quote unquote, that I can say, technically that's Portal Fantasy how you got there. I don't know how you did it, but that's technically Portal Fantasy. That's the closest I've seen so far.
ReZero, for all it's considered a cornerstone of the isekai genre, has a lot more hallmarks in common with Portal Fantasy, as we defined it earlier, than it does with a lot of other isekai.
True. Now, like, honestly, if there's anything that I hope gets taken from ReZero, it's like, hey, use more Portal Fantasy tropes within isekai. I'm interested in it, because I've seen a few isekai that have done a little bit of that. One that came out recently. What is it? It's I believe the name of the show is I Have to Make, Making 1,000 Gold in Another World, something like that. Let me see if I can find the name of it. You can tell I prepared for this extremely well.
We all do. This is also a thing with just isekai titles in general. I know Japan has, the story titles, but Isekai especially have the wildest titles.
Oh, yeah, like there's there's no saving 80,000 gold in another world for my retirement. That's the full name of the anime. I honestly recommend this one because this one I found unique for an isekai in so much as the character, one, doesn't die, but two, her entire goal, like she can transport herself, other things, as well as other people from the original world or real world to the isekai world. Like she can just hop back and forth, right?
Hmm.
And I find that super fascinating because that is a rarity as far as isekai is concerned, right? Rarely do you see one, connections back to the original world, but two, the character being able to go back and forth between like you can in Portal Fantasy.
Yeah, if we do look at the two big ones, Mushoku doesn't directly have the character go back, or not yet, from what I've consumed of the product. But it's more the lasting memories of his previous life have a bigger effect on Rudy
Mhm.
than most other isekai characters. And we do have the same with uh, Subaru, but he actually gets a chance to go to, a manifestation of his past and, experience that.
Mhm.
But also does still have the lingering effects of being a failure in the original world. And
Yes.
yeah, and that's pretty good on how in Isekai we see the character go back and forth or go to. Do you think Truck-Kun will be, become less popular over time? Or do you think his stock is just going to keep on rising? Invest in
Who's
Truck-Kun.
say? Oh, Truck-Kun.
Yeah.
Uh I think you're already starting to see a move away from that, right? You're already starting to see like random knife guy, and you're even starting to see like I've seen another one that came out recently this year. That the characters just die. The character just died of old age. And this one, I think it's not necessarily isekai. I think it's called Tensei. Your boy Kong Ming.
Hmm.
Highly recommend this show. Very
Mm,
slept on in the season it came
I've
out,
heard
which
good things
was
about that one.
it's basically the premise of the show, right? Is Zhuge Liang dies in the past, is reincarnated in the future in Japan, and that's it. And basically says, "Oh wow, I love this person singing. I'm gonna make them popular," and that's the show.
There's also uh, one, spoilers, but one of the two deaths in Oshinoko is a long-term illness. So perhaps we're going to see, because reincarnation, while it's not isekai, they're closely
No, I think
associated.
for Oshinoko and for My Star and for your boy Kong Ming, they're considered tensei anime. Anime, I believe, is the subgenre.
Hmm.
Don't quote me. I'm not like super subgenre savvy when it comes to my anime, I
Yeah,
will admit.
I think Tensei is like reincarnation.
I think,
So,
another instance of the characters dying to get to the other world, but in a very unique way is, I believe, So I'm a Spider, So What, just have the characters essentially get nuked.
wild.
I shit you not, that's what happens. It's not like, an actual nuke. It's like, hey, a god decided, you know, here's my one. This school in particular, and all the kids were basically killed in a heavenly explosion. I don't know what other way to describe it other than that. So yeah, I think we're starting to see the move away from Truck-Kun. I think you're never going to fully move away from it. It's too much of a meme not to, right?
Mm.
And it's too recognizable not to. People always enjoy it, I think, because it's always ridiculous and funny. But yeah, I think we're starting to at least see to some degree a move away from it. Another like something that's becoming more and more popular is the overwork genre of isekai, where the characters literally just worked themselves to death and they end up in another world, and this is their second chance to, hey,
Japan made that a trope? I
Yes,
am
they did.
shocked.
Yeah, it's actually a thing. I've seen more than one isekai where the character just, oh man, I'm so tired. I've been working so long. Let me just go to sleep, and then just wakes up.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
died. Oh no.
So let's move on to the
Dark.
next one.
When
the
you
next,
think about it.
The next two, which I think kind of group together, which are harem plots and over-sexualization. Do you find that this happens more often in isekai than other genres of anime you watch?
I mean, no,
you know.
because harem anime is a thing that exists. So definitely
Yeah,
not.
but do you find it often closely associated as a sort of subgenre in isekai stories?
I mean, yeah, I would say like there's definitely a subgenre for harem anime and for harem isekai, right? Like it's definitely a thing. You can see it again, it goes along with the escapism and the power fantasy, especially if the target audience is mostly males, which for a lot of isekai it is. But there is the reverse where you see the female harem. Yeah, my next life as a villainess, all routes lead to doom. That's definitely the reverse, where it's a female and she gets the harem, and a lot of it is female characters, which hey, I'm great with that. That's all right.
Yeah,
Give
I
me,
never like. Of course, I don't like the classical idea of a harem. Like, I think they're pretty trash. But I think as long as it's the dynamic of however many people involved is good and interesting, I don't have a problem with it.
agreed.
In terms of like, if it's written well, it's written well. It doesn't matter what the trope is.
I would agree with that. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, it's one of those things of it doesn't bother me. It's just more often than not, I'll just kind of all right, yeah, sure, we're doing that. Hopefully I enjoy the characters. If not, hopefully there's something more there to enjoy. More often than not, there's not though. But that's a different discussion you can have with isekai in general, though. But we'll get there, maybe. But talking about over sexualization, yeah, that's not a thing you write well. That's just a thing you have to unfortunately put up with. With certain,
either they or not, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, it's one of those things that unfortunately, when it comes to anime, especially certain types of anime, and a lot of it, unfortunately, that's just one of those things you have to accept that, yeah, that's going to be there. That's the fan service. It's going to be there. At the very least, I think we're getting into a point where your more general anime is starting to do that less, or they're trying to hide it, quote unquote, more by, obfuscating it. I would say, like, here's your fan service, but it's done in a very specific type of way, and you have to really look for it. We're starting to do more of that, or we're starting to do the thing of, like, yeah, you can tell this is fan service, but if you're not genre savvy, you won't notice it, right? Because of like, oh, we're gonna do very particular types of camera shots, not just like, oh, hey, here's your upskirt shot. No, like we're doing the camera in a very particular way, right? And yes, that's unfortunately upskirt shot. That's a thing. That's hate that that's a thing, but it is a thing for anime. But yeah, like they're starting to get more classy, quote unquote. That feels wrong to say.
The high tier, pinky out fan service.
Yeah, yeah. Like they're starting to do more of that, I would say, right? And it's getting harder to notice that they're doing it, in my opinion. Or I would just become like just numb to
Jaded.
it. Yeah, and it's like it doesn't faze me as much as it used to, unless they're blatant about it.
I think it also
Looking
helps.
at you, high school prodigies in another world.
It also helps that some of the most popular anime that have crossed over to the West typically don't have as much of that hypersexualization fan service. Like,
No, because that's not a thing that's appreciated as much over here.
yeah, especially North America. Europe, we'd probably be like, huh. America, like, burn it down, ship it back.
Although that's becoming less of a thing over here too, though. As well.
Yeah.
We're beginning to get a little bit less prudish.
You're entering the 2000s of the Europeans. Good job.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're catching up eventually.
Yeah, but
Someday we may be a civilized people.
how do you
today.
feel about sort of shameless hypersexualization? Ones where it's like, that's just a thing here, and like I'm talking about like character design here. Like, how do you feel about sort of those hypersexualized character designs?
The really skimpy stuff or the
Yeah,
yeah.
like why is that what you're wearing? Like we sometimes get that in like like we get that in anime, of course. Like if you look at like Yaoyorozu's costume in
Oh
My
yeah.
Hero, as much as you can claim it's for a quirk, we all know what's there. But
the the worst I've seen it, right? And it's honestly an anime that I have talked about before with many different people, and I kind of recommend it, not because it's good, mind. And I think, right, there's a conversation you can have here in a general sense of majority of isekai you watch, right? They're not very great. They're not good. They're not bad. They're just bland. We can talk more about that a little bit later, but I kind of love shit when it's just, this is excessively bad, right? This is offensively bad.
you're
Because
looking
at
at
least,
Samurai Cop, The Room,
or yeah, stuff like
Troll
that. Or
2.
just what I'm about to recommend. High school prodigies have it easy even in another world. This is a bad isekai. Don't get me wrong here, right? I'm not going to recommend this show, but I kind of do recommend it because I loved how, actually, you know what? You asked me earlier if there's any that genuinely disappointed me. This is one that I'm going to do the reverse. It didn't disappoint me. It made me more interested in the show for how it changed up one of its main characters. Because it's totally out of left field. There is no lead up to it. It genuinely just shocked me to find out that this apparent supposed high school girl does not look like a high school girl who's a like accomplished, already, licensed and has multiple PhDs doctor who can do brain surgery, like genuinely in this show for whatever reason. She's just that good, that smart. Anyways, all from Japan, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Let's not forget that part. I believe. I could be mistaken. Maybe they actually did a little bit of a nice thing and said they were from different parts of the world. I don't remember. I don't care enough to remember. Turns out she's just a psychopath. Later in the show, you have to watch 9 fucking episodes in order to get to that point. But she's just a psychopath who just can, with a little bit of brain surgery, rewire people's brains to make them behave and act the way she wants. And she just does that shit. And you find out she's done that shit in the real world because, like, oh, hey, she gets off on it, apparently. It's fucking insane. I kind of loved it. You have to go through a lot of trash and a lot of fan servicey trash to get to that point. But it kind of made me fall in love with that show in the last 3 episodes.
You swim through the bland,
not even bland.
The
It's
uninspiring,
bad. Like,
and the
it's
below
bad.
average, and you find the sweet, steaming pile of crap.
Oh, and that's why I recommend it, right? Because it stuck with me. It's offensively bad. Don't go watch the show for if you go into the show, expect it to be bad. But I loved it because it's so bad. Holy shit.
It's the difference between like watching like one of those infamous movies, like It's So Bad It's Good, and watching like the 4th Michael Bay Transformers movie.
Oh yeah,
that's bad, but it's like you'll just go like, yep, this is exactly what a bad movie would feel like.
Yeah, there's nothing exceptional in it, right? Like you watch The Room and you can tell there's effort put in there. You can tell like people tried for this, but it's still horrible. You watch Michael Bay Transformers and it's like, it's nice. You probably be entertained by it.
Good
it's
point.
Bad, but it's like not offensively bad.
So how about we talk about something that is a hot topic conversation in Japanese market?
Mm-hmm.
Overcrowding of modern Japanese and manga and anime of isekai. So the claim is that isekai, it holds so much sort of the reading share, as I would describe it, of the anime and manga market now. What do you feel about these claims? These are things that people say.
I personally would believe it. I think there is a lot of isekai around right now, right? So
Mhm.
much of it. I think this season of anime releases alone, or there's a little bit less. Excuse me. There's a little bit less this season. I think there's only two, maybe three this season that's releasing. I
And
think,
one of them is Mushoku.
and yes, one of them is Mushoku. So one of them is a second season.
Yeah.
Last season releases for anime, I think there were 4 or 5, maybe more, right?
and
And
and how many of those are like worth your time? you know?
yeah, I mean that's another that's I spoke about it a little bit earlier, right? In so much as there is a lot of isekai that's released, and a lot of it is fairly bland. I think I have a list here of around 30 or more that I've watched. I've watched a lot of bland isekai. Again, I enjoy the fantasy genre, won't lie. And I want to know, right? When people say, no, this is bad, don't watch it. I have to know. I'm one of those people, I'm going to dip my toes in the water. I got to find out at the very least, like, is it terrible? No, it's just not great, right? You're going to sit down, you're going to watch it. You'll probably have a little bit of fun with it. But at the end of the day, you're going to walk away from it after you're done. And you're going to probably have forgotten just about everything from it. You know, last season I watched I believe not last season, but I recently watched oh no, last season, Reborn to Master the Blade, from Hero King to Extraordinary Squire. That's a name. I believe that was last season, and it was okay, but if you ask me to tell you anything about that show, I can't tell you anything, but I had fun with it. The only thing I can tell you from that show is that the main character is Goku sexual. She loves to fight. That's it. That's all I can tell you. That's all I remember from it. And that's in my opinion, whether it's true or not, I think the anime industry in a general sense, if we can kind of go to general discussion for just a moment,
hmm
is going to reach, if they've not already reached, a potential problem, maybe, in that there's a lot of stuff that's being produced, and a lot of it is meh at best. It's mediocre at best. That it's entertaining.
Time fillers.
Yeah.
It's not like classically bad stuff. It's not all this is bad, the story's bad, writing bad, animation bad. This is a thing, and it's there to fill time.
I would compare it to from a Western standpoint, to like your live action audience, like your live studio audience shows, right? Stuff like that. Your general tent to
Your
comedy/drama shows over here. That
your
there's so many
sitcom,
of them.
yeah,
Yeah, sitcom stuff. That's the word I'm looking for.
yeah.
But yeah, your general sitcoms, right? Like there's so many of those being released, and majority of them not that great, but they're not terrible.
For every How I Met Your Mother, Friends, or Seinfeld, there are like six you can name off that had one season and left.
Yeah, like you can name, yeah, like yeah, just yeah, yeah. So that's what I would compare it to, and I guess over here that's not a problem, but we have there are many other live action shows that are you can get a hold of and watch, that there's not a ton of them released every season or every um however we do our show stuff over here, I forget, but there's at least one or two that you can watch that are these are your high prestige shows, right?
Hmm.
I know they have other types of programming over in the East or in Japan specifically, but for at least looking at anime, yeah, I would say it's potentially a problem, and I don't know when it'll become a major problem for them, but at the very least, from my perspective, I think it'll be a problem eventually at some point where it is overcrowded and they are releasing too many, and maybe it's worth looking at pulling back.
It also, just from my understanding, is it's very, as a market, it's closed a lot, right? In terms of the amount of studios,
Say again.
it's a very closed market.
Hmm.
So in terms of studios who are actually getting these, you know, there are only so many studios and so many ones who are able to make these
No,
anime.
that's fair. That's true.
You know, we when we, you know, for example, in terms of production companies, not like people who air them, but companies who make stuff, there are quite a few in the West. Whereas anime is a lot more difficult. I mean, look at some of and also overworking,
Yeah.
which is something that is in Japanese culture in general,
Hmm.
and especially in the manga and anime area.
I would also say like it's a unique position to be in as well, right? Where that you don't anime from other Eastern countries hasn't made its way over here as much. There are Korean anime you can watch. There's Chinese anime you can watch. And they're starting to get better. There's still some rockiness here or there with some of that, but we're starting to see some of that stuff getting better, but it's just not getting translated as much and brought over here as much. So, from our perspective, anime generally tends to only come from Japan, right? Whereas you see live action shows, you can get some like high quality prestige type shows from the UK, from, you know,
Korea.
yeah, Korea. You can
Some
get
of
some
those
stuff
Korean
from,
shows, man, they hit the
yeah,
right spot.
they hit well. Yeah, some of them. And you can see stuff from many different countries within the EU in general, as well as, you have Canada, you have the US, you have, some stuff from South America as well. You can see that prestige shows.
Yeah, it's funny to think that anime is like 98% of, or like even like 99% of all anime we see is out of one country.
Hmm.
And it's a question of, will anime style, you know, we've seen it in Western stuff. You know, there are obviously a lot of newer projects that are made by people who are inspired by anime.
I mean, the Outhouse is a perfect example for this particular episode.
Yeah. Uh, and we're all fans of Ruby, which
Hmm.
is Japanese inspired hell, anime inspired. So,
I mean, Ruby's a definite, like, one of those things that stands out as a unique thing, right? That Rooster Teeth has on their hands, in so
mm,
much as it is an anime, literally. I mean, I know people
yes,
will get uppity when I say that, but it is an anime made by the West that has become popular in Japan as well, right? That has gained popularity throughout the world, even in Japan, competing against other anime, the place of anime. And like it sets in a very unique and interesting position for that reason. I don't even think Avatar: The Last Airbender managed to achieve that, right?
it is amazing to see how that project managed to get popular over there, where so many other, you know, things that are really popular over here just don't reach Japan. But somehow Ruby translated is because it's inspired by animes of and that these people watched when they were younger, the creators, and went on to then make. Uh, which does beg the question: when's when are we getting our animated Western isekai, full on isekai mode? I want to see Truck-Kun coming down a highway, you know.
I think, I mean, I think one, you'll see that in live action before you see it in animated form over here, right?
Hmm.
Which I'm all for that live action. Give me a live action. Oh, good Lord. Give me a live Netflix. You can do it. I believe in you. Give me a live action Jobless Reincarnation or Mushiko Tensei. Do it. Give it to me. I
I
want to
think
see it.
a lot of scenes would be illegal. It feels like.
Probably. But Netflix, I believe in you. You're willing to take on anything still, right? Just about. I know you've canceled a lot, but you have some open space now. And you've been doing a lot of live action stuff. I've seen that live action One Piece shit. Me, man. Me.
So,
But
do you think that the isekai train is it like, as we would describe in Western trends, sort of like how zombies became popular in Western media for a period of time, how superheroes dominated? It seems like they're finally falling off a little bit and we're not dominated by superhero culture anymore. Do you think that's what we're dealing with isekai, or is it just is it
I don't know.
studio pushed? Is it audience demand? From what you can tell,
It's been popular for a long time now, right? At least it feels that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like it's been popular for many years now. But I think, like, over in Japan, I believe it's been popular since forever. I think one of the first isekais, like, they have, I think, some of their culture, right? Some of their own history. And
yeah, it's the idea of isekai is based on a historical fable.
yeah, it's Urashima Taro, I believe is the
Mm-hmm.
name of it. It's, one of their fairy tales. It's basically an isekai, right? I forget the name of the isekai that first came out and modernized it all, but that's the one that kind of started it. And it's always been around a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, speaking of that, though, it's worth noting, right? Portal Fantasy over here is more popular than what I think people give it credit for. Like, yeah, when you look up Portal Fantasy as a genre and what all constitutes Portal Fantasy over here in the West, there's not a lot. But I think the difference is that Portal Fantasy over here is more often than not used as a, hey, we're going to do this kind of one-off episode, or we're going to do this one-off
Yeah.
movie out of a series. Like, Ash, Evil Dead, I think it is, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Ash versus the Army of Darkness. That's Portal Fantasy, right? But that's just one movie out of a series of movies. And then you have many, many animated shows over here where they do one episode of, like, hey, here's our Portal Fantasy episode where our characters do this or that. And this is kind of our, like, hey, kids, escapism is okay, but too much escapism can be a bad thing show, to teach the kids a lesson about escapism. Because
How many times do we see people get stuck in a TV or something, a TV land, and a video game?
right, like, I think that's also like a cultural thing too, because escapism over here generally tends to get seen as a bad thing, right? Like, you want, like, it's always a thing of, you're going to want to come back to the real world eventually at some point, because the real world's not all that bad. It's, yeah, sure, it has its problems, but it's not all that bad. And maybe you're the problem, right? It's always the lesson that gets taught over here for when it comes to escapism, that it's okay, but too much is a problem, and you need to come back. And yeah, that, again, not a bad moral. That's not exactly a wrong thing to teach, but in a sense, right, there's some issues there. But anyways, another discussion. Whereas isekai, it's all about the escapism, right? It's all about the power fantasy. It's all about, getting heavy into it. And so I would argue Portal Fantasy is just as popular as isekai already is, and that both of these things have always been in, and around. They just get used a lot. It's just over here, Portal Fantasy has not been turned into a thing of, like, oh, we have a ton of shows based off of this, right? That this is the focus, right? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Isekai, that's all it is. Like, this is the focus, is the, coming from another world, or at least, like, that's the first premise. I would say, we're getting to a point now where Isekai is starting to more and more drift to, we're going to vaguely mention that it's an isekai at some point in the show, but that's not really the focus at all.
So,
Like,
in terms of that, how many isekai have you seen that you thought this could just be a fantasy anime?
ooh,
Like, is there like a sizable number?
um,
Because I've also heard sort of the claim that people just sort of slap the isekai, sticker on it and
no,
go, mm-hmm.
yeah, I'd agree. Like, out of everything I've seen, yeah, that I would say it's a pretty sizable. It's like one that came out this season that I think a lot of people really enjoyed, and that I personally really enjoyed as well, and that I highly recommend. Magirivo, or the magical revolution of the reincarnated princess and the genius young lady. Oh, anime names. This is one that it's briefly mentioned. Like, other than the title, it's briefly mentioned that she's from another world. And you can kind of get it from subcontext. Like, they're not subtle about it. She's making things, using magic that's, really advanced. It's like, okay, I see you, show. And then she briefly mentions it to another character very late into the show. And it's like, okay, as an audience viewer, yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. But okay, I don't think we needed her to be from another world or from Japan, modern day Japan. But okay, I get it. I guess, I'm not surprised, but yeah, you don't need this. And that's not the only show, right? There's so many shows. Land of Liddell, the strongest sage with the weakest crest, or another one that I think is fairly popular. The greatest demon lord is reborn as a typical nobody. Like, these shows don't really need the isekai plotline to a degree. And I mean, some of those that I've mentioned, you could probably argue aren't necessarily isekai, or they fall into a subgenre, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine, but I don't like. Yeah, I 100% agree with most people when they say, "Yeah, this doesn't need. This is just slapped on. You don't need this. It doesn't need to be here. You could do without it. You could just build this as a general fantasy show, and it'd be perfectly fine."
Have an actual unique main character who isn't modern Japanese person thrown into awkward situation.
No, I mean, the problem is I think they're wising up to this and starting to do this a lot, but because there are many anime that I've watched recently that this feels like an isekai, but just sans the isekai part because everything feels the same. There was one a while back that I watched, Monster Tamer, not Monster Tamer, it's Beast Tamer, that's it. Like, very generic anime. Remember practically nothing from it, but I do remember at the very least that, like, this feels like one of the isekai, but it's not an isekai at all.
Mm.
And there's a lot that are like that, So I think even if they are slapping the isekai label onto way too many things, I think the problem is a little bit more than that. It's a little bit deeper than that, right?
Sure. I mean, that's more about just storytelling and what they make it in general.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I think we've had a good show here. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah.
Ian, anything in the mailbag?
We do not have any new mail this week. We love hearing from our audience, the few of you who have reached out to us. So please, if there's anything that you want us to talk about on the show, or if you just want to say hi, send us an email. Our address is fanfictapes@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on Twitter.
Hey, the site formerly known as Twitter.
I refuse to call it X.
Yeah, I won't call it that. I'll just call it the site formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah. So on the site formerly known as Twitter, our handle is @thefanfictiontapes. Our usual host, Maya, runs that account. And she'll post about new episodes and other stuff. We would also appreciate it if you would give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to this show.
All right, we've hit our word count for the day. Thank you for listening. I've been Dylan, and with me I've had
Wolf
and Ian. Until next time, bye.